What power does the president have to impose a duty on Canada? Well, that's a good question, and it's really not that easy to answer. My name's Brian. I make videos about civics and law. I'm going to do my best to give you what answers I do have and kind of take you on a walk through the law as I see it and show you where you can look the stuff up for yourself. Please share this video and get it out there so people will see it. Civics are important and we should all learn this stuff. Okay, so we're going to start with the Constitution because Article 1, Section 8 gives exclusive power to Congress. Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes and duties. And this is a duty. A tariff is a duty. It's a tax on imported goods. So Congress does have the power to do this, and we have something called the Non-Delegation Doctrine, which isn't a huge deal anymore. People don't really follow it, but it does say that branches of the government aren't supposed to delegate their powers. And even though they do a lot, if a law isn't super clear about delegating the powers, the court does tend to say, you know what, because of the non-delegation doctrine, we're going to err on the side of a non-delegated doctrine. So we're going to have to see a pretty clear delegation of power here if the president's going to exercise a power that is clearly delegated to Congress. So I'm going to tell you what's in the EO and what the claim is that gives the president the power to impose this tariff. So the president has essentially relied on three different powers to give him the right to create this duty. The first one is the National Emergencies Act, which is 50 U.S.C. 1601 et sec, which means everything after that. That means that the president has declared a national emergency. And the important parts of that are that, first of all, the president has to declare a national emergency. The national emergency the president has declared is that fentanyl is getting in and out of our borders through Canada and Mexico. For the record, that national emergency will have to be evaluated by Congress after a certain number of months, and Congress will have to vote on it in order to, I believe that that's a requirement, I think within 6 months, that the Congress has to vote whether or not to keep it active. The other important one is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which allows the president to impose certain economic things in the case of a presidential emergency. So he's already declared the emergency. Now he's allowed to do certain international things. The thing about the International Emergencies Economic Powers is that it tends to discuss a lot of things about like an army invading, things like that. You can find it at 50 U.S.C. 1701 and kind of look at the wording. Particularly look at 1702, I believe. And you'll see it talks a lot about, you know, an invading army, that sort of thing. So it's definitely created for a different sort of emergency, but it does give the president the power to investigate, regulate, or prohibit any transactions in foreign exchange. So if he's allowed to prohibit transactions, he could probably, and regulate them, then he would also probably be able to impose a duty on them. The question is, though, if the president has somewhat unlimited power to declare an emergency related to, say, drugs getting across the border, and then impose a duty related to, say, eggs getting across the border, the relation between those two things might not be close enough for it to pass constitutional scrutiny. So a lawsuit bringing this in front of the Supreme Court might not succeed. The third law that the president uses to kind of justify this use of power is the Trade Act of 1974 as amended, which you can find at 19 U.S.C. 2483 and 2486 are the two sections I would recommend reading. And this is really where he drives the point home, because in 2483, the president is given the power to adjust duties and adjust tariffs. The thing is, though, that it is a regular adjustment that the president is supposed to do. When this was written in 1974, we did not have a free trade agreement with Canada. And so at the time, the president was supposed to, you know, kind of on a regular basis, go through and make adjustments to the tariffs that we had in place. There was like a whole schedule of tariffs on different things. He was supposed to go through regularly and like tweak them. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's supposed to be imposing new ones, especially 25% new ones, big ones, and especially not based on his emergency powers. This is definitely kind of unrelated to the emergency powers. So I would say in that case, it's a little bit of a stretch, but again, this isn't a question that I would be able to answer. This would be a question for the guys in robes. The fact that there is a law that gives him the ability to adjust duties and that he has these Emergency Power Act, they're not necessarily connected. They're not necessarily unconnected either, because they are both powers that he's been granted by Congress. So it's going to be a question for, again, for the black robes to take a look at and decide whether they're close enough or not. Now, there's one more thing that the president does not bring up in the executive order, but that I feel like I should at least mention, which is the president has historically had a pretty strong power when it comes to international affairs. And I talked the other day about Hamilton versus Madison, talking about what the executive power means and whether there's some sort of international broad power attached to the presidency that goes sort of beyond the Constitution. And Hamilton, early on talked a lot about how, we had to make sure that the presidency was strong enough, especially on international affairs, to make sure that we remained a strong country. So with that in mind, on the one hand, we have this competing issue about non-delegation of powers. We gave the power of tariffs to Congress, and if it's an iffy question, we should probably lean on the side of leaving the power with them. On the other hand, we've always had this idea that we give a little leniency to the president on having stronger powers when it comes to international stuff. So those are two kind of extra constitutional ideas, outside of the Constitution ideas, that both weigh in on this argument outside of the laws that are actually cited. But when we're talking about the actual laws, there are technically 4 of them cited in this executive order, and you should go read them yourself so you know what's going on. One of them is 3 U.S.C. 301, which basically says the president is allowed to delegate power. It doesn't say a whole lot. One is 19 U.S.C. 2483. I also recommend looking at 2486, and that says that the president is allowed to adjust the tariff schedules. And then if you look at 50 U.S.C. 1701 and 50 U.S.C. 1601, you'll see the 2 emergency powers laws. And you can kind of see what the requirements are around an emergency and what the powers are in an emergency. So hopefully I've given you a little bit of a balanced look at this. There is no clear answer here. I think this will probably end up in the courts, but this is my legal analysis. And if you guys have questions, let me know in the comments. All right, thanks for watching.